So today I want to react to a video telling Australians to leave the country if they're unhappy with how it's run. You see, I think that's a pretty lame thing to tell people. I also think it's quite out of touch and elitist when a lot of Australians, whether or not they like the government in power, are already finding it difficult to afford to live here as it is, let alone just be able to afford to up and leave the country because they have a bit of a disagreement as to how it's being run. But anyway, let's not get ahead of ourselves. We'll get into the actual criticism in a moment, but first, let's introduce our subject today. This fella here on TikTok, Huddy, he seems to have a moderately successful TikTok account where he mostly seems to chit-chat about the state of Australia. You can see there's a couple of videos he has that does all right, and then every now and then he has one that kind of pops off and gets a little bit viral. And today we're talking about this video that recently went viral about the state of Australia today and why he has left. This guy made his way into my feed through this account on Twitter, Stand Up Australia, but also at Stand Up Global. I'm not sure whether it's got Australia in the profile picture, so I think it's Australia specific. Not sure why his username has global in there, but this is how this came through my feed. It says, young people have had enough and are leaving Australia. And this video and this take was just so interesting to me that I felt like I wanted to react to it in a video for you guys. But before we look at this video, I do want to point out two kind of red flags with this account. For one, I don't know if this account, it's got no profile picture, so I don't know if it was like recently banned or suspended. He does seem to have an alternate account on TikTok. You can see this one does have a profile picture. So first red flag that we notice is that he does have here, I'm unemployed and make money online. Here's my free training. That is just red flag city, okay? Anyone who's out there making content, selling courses and online trainings, the red flags are immediately up. I'm already thinking, okay, maybe you're a bit of a scammer. He did originally have a training course in the bio of this account, which I did open up here. This was what would come up when you clicked through. Learn the recession-proof skills that puts you in a multi-billion-dollar industry. I mean, it sounds like a complete scam. And so, yeah, that's the first red flag that we come across when looking into this guy's account. I also want to point out something quite interesting is that while this account doesn't get like terrible views, it gets a couple of thousand views per post, by far the views that end up like going viral and getting viewed by a lot of people are the ones that are more like politically charged. Like here, this one down here has 3.2 million. And we're going to watch this later, but it's clearly like a rant against the way things are in Australia. As you see, the caption here is Australia is cooked. And I point that out to show you that it's very clear to me that for posters like this and this Stand Up Global Twitter account, any kind of a video that is explicitly negative about the state of Australian politics seems to be more likely to do numbers for these kinds of accounts, right? I just think that's interesting. Some people might say that's because a whole lot of people are fed up and that's the videos they're drawn to, but I just get the sense that a lot of these videos end up being kind of like rage bait, controversy on purpose so that you can get clicks and views over a topic that's kind of hotly contested, such as, you know, how are things going in Australia? But anyway, enough dancing around the point. Let's actually get to the video and see what the hell he's talking about. Let's find out why young people have had enough and are leaving Australia. Let's take a look.
I've officially left Australia and I don't fucking plan to come back because that country is fucked. One thing I do want to make clear though, it's not because I hate Australia, it's because the country's forced me to leave. There's so much bullshit that's going on right now. You've got mass immigration.
Okay. So right out the gate, I want to say that there is no the country forced me to leave unless you literally got deported. Like Australia and other Western countries, they do force some people to leave, like genuinely force them to leave by deporting them. But that's not what happened to you. You just decided you want to leave. So no, the Australian government did not force you to leave. You chose to go live somewhere else.
That country is fucked. One thing I do want to make clear though, it's not because I hate Australia, it's because the country's forced me to leave.
Yeah, so I just don't like that framing of it because I'm sorry if you did not hate Australia and if you actually loved this country, you wouldn't just leave the moment things get a little bit undesirable, or let's say the leader is not running it exactly the way you want it to be run. But I want to understand today, I want to know like what is the psychology behind this kind of thing. So let's understand why it is he left Australia.
Much bullshit that's going on right now. You've got mass immigration completely out of control, which is causing people to protest. There's been a lot of assaults recently, a lot of stabbings in the news. The Australian government's also fucked. Everyone hates Albanese.
Okay, there's a lot to break down just in that sentence alone, so let's start with this.
You've got mass immigration completely out of control.
Okay, so mass immigration completely out of control is definitely a mischaracterization of what's going on.
Causing people to protest.
Okay, so people have been protesting the immigration rates in Australia, and they have been urging the politicians to reduce immigration. Personally, I would characterize those protests as a little bit more like fringe than mainstream. I mean, a lot of people did go to a lot of these protests, but I don't know, even within that framework, that immigration needs to go down and it's out of control, which I'm not conceding, but let's just play into it for this guy's sake. Isn't it a good thing that we have the ability to protest? Like, there's a whole lot of people that disagree with that government policy, and they were able to put themselves out in the public and, you know, have their voices heard, protest the government's immigration policy. Because to me, even if you do think that immigration is out of control and needs to be reduced, shouldn't you be at least happy that there was a sizable amount of people that were able to voice those concerns and go out and use their free speech, participate in the democratic process, you know, send a message to politicians that this is what they want or this is what they don't want. And I know that might sound a little bit like nebulous and vague, but this guy's talking about leaving the country over this kinds of stuff. So I'm just saying, like, how can you look at all of that and think of it as like a good enough reason to just completely leave? Like, if you leave, then there'll be less people to support the protests to push politicians to do what you want to do. Like, I just don't. It kind of baffles me. And then he says something quite interesting. Let's listen to this.
There's been a lot of assaults recently, a lot of stabbings in the news.
Okay, so that's an interesting phrase. There's been a lot of assaults lately, and there's been a lot of stabbings in the news. Now, it doesn't seem like he's referring to any actual statistics there, which I don't want to criticize too harshly, because I don't want to say it's okay to base your politics just on vibes, but a lot of people, a lot of the public, they do base their kind of political headwinds on vibes. And so I don't want to just discount that, right? If you do feel like, oh, there's a lot of crime and there's a lot of assaults and there's a lot of stabbings, then that's not entirely an unfair political point. But when he says there's a lot of stabbings in the news lately, it's like, okay, well then maybe you're just reading a lot of news about stabbings. Like, that doesn't actually translate to a mass increase in like violent stabbings across the country. Now, when it comes to assaults, that I don't have any issue with that statement or the characterization that there's a lot of assaults happening across the country. That is unfortunately something that I think affects all of us, right? We should all want a less volatile, less violent country. If there are people out there, and a lot of times it's young people, young men, they get into fights or get addicted to substances and it leads to some sort of a fight over that. Yeah, those are not good things, right? But if you care about the country and if you want the country to get better, then you should like want to make sure we reduce those things and work on it and like try to think of solutions instead of just saying, oh, there's a lot of it going on, so I'm gonna leave. You know, I haven't spoken about this properly in a video yet, and I will at some point, but earlier this year I got punched in the face. I was like actually assaulted, and I went to the police and they found the person and they charged them with assault. And so I have experienced this like issue of assault firsthand, and I do think that it's awful, right? It sucks when people are violently attacked just randomly. Now, in my case, it wasn't an immigrant or anything like that. It was just some other Australian that got angry and punched me. But look at me. I'm still here, right? I got punched in the face and I got a massive black eye. I didn't decide, oh, I'm going to leave the country because it's not worth trying to make a life here or trying to make things better. That's just silly, and methinks this guy is a poser. Also, like, not for nothing, but the whole thing about knife crime and stabbings, it's like, hey, knives are awful and I don't like any kinds of violence, and I do think we need to work as hard as we can as a society to reduce. Usually, a lot of the time, it's like these young incel freak terrorists that go around and do these stabbings or shootings. But there is a notable silver lining, and that's that we don't have gun violence to the degree that, like, in North America, you have gun violence. South America, even, like, on this continent, in this part of the world, gun violence is very rare and not something we have to deal with on a society-wide level. So, like, not to do a full whataboutism, but come on, man. Like, we should be at least a little bit grateful for that. Okay, let's see what else this guy has a problem with this country.
Australian government's also fucked. Everyone hates Albanese. Plus, you get taxed on basically everything nowadays, and it's a fuck ton. I was getting taxed like 45 to 50% of my fucking income.
Okay. So, wow. So he also says here...
It's also fucked. Everyone hates Albanese.
Which is just not true. Now look, there is definitely a contingency of Australian voters that don't like Anthony Albanese and are not happy with him as Prime Minister. I won't deny their feelings or deny that they exist, right? But we did literally have an election a couple of months ago in May where about 90% of the country voted, and of that 90%, a pretty high proportion voted for Anthony Albanese, so much so to the point that he basically won in a landslide. And so I'm just not really sure how you can characterize that political reality. Like, an election is basically the largest opinion poll that we have every couple of years. And within that, Anthony Albanese did pretty well, like probably better than quite a few of the more recent prime ministers. So I just don't really get how you are so disconnected from reality that you're saying, you know, everyone hates Albanese. Like, I don't know, man. Ask the average voter. And this is not me saying that we should all just blindly simp the leader because he's the prime minister, right? I think whoever the prime minister is, whether they're Labour or Liberal or, God forbid, One Nation or Greens, I think that they should be subject to criticism from every average voter, right? Everyone should be able to criticize the leader, and we should all be, like, skeptical and hold the leader to a high standard. But I just get this sense that this characterization of Albanese as, like, widely hated by almost all the Australian public is just a lie. And I don't know to what end they're lying about this, because I've seen this guy, and also, you know, I mentioned this Twitter account that likes to characterize Albanese as incredibly unpopular in Australia. And I just don't really get what the angle is. It seems to me like they're trying to wish cast and pretend that their political ideology, which pretty much lost at the last election and really did not do very well. They're trying to, like, gaslight people online into thinking that that ideology is actually a lot more widespread and popular than the polls would have you believe. But as I said, an election is kind of the largest countrywide poll that we do every couple of years, and it didn't put the type of ideology that this guy is espousing very high up in, you know, electoral popularity. But I guess if you get on TikTok and if you assert that as fact and make it out to, you know, whoever's watching that Albanese is just this hated guy, then, you know, you get a video that gets hundreds of thousands of views and tens of thousands of likes, and maybe you make a couple of bucks.
Plus, you get taxed on basically everything nowadays, and it's a fuck ton. I was getting taxed like 45 to 50% of my fucking income.
Okay, I mean, the tax conversation I think is fair. Like, I think it's absolutely fair for the average citizen to say, hey, I pay all this much in taxes, what am I getting back for it? That's like a pretty simple part of political discourse. To me, I think the answer to being unhappy with where are our taxes going and all those sorts of questions, I think the answer is to demand that, you know, those taxes get used in the budget in a way that directly benefits us. And to Albanese's credit, I think in some places in the economy, he's doing that, right? Increasing the funding that goes towards Medicare bulk billing, increasing the amount of, like, maternity and paternity leave, you know, those kinds of policies that actually directly help people. You know, the Medicare stuff is directly deflationary when it comes to healthcare. That to me is, like, good usage of our taxpayer money. Obviously, I think being a citizen and being part of the conversation means you're allowed to disagree with the way it gets spent and the way it gets used. But also, I want to hone in on something that this guy said. He said he's paying about 45 to 50% in taxes, and I just want to remind everyone out there that 45% is the tax rate that applies to people who make $190,000 or more a year. So this guy is putting himself in this tax bracket of 190,000 plus per year. Like I said, I think it's a legitimate political position to say that taxes are too high and that you want them to be lowered, but I struggle to have a huge amount of sympathy when, you know, you're comfortable relatively to most other Australians. Okay, what else does he have for us?
Live in Australia is completely cooked as well. It's only becoming more and more impossible to afford a property for this generation or even the next generation coming.
Okay, that is like the first, I think, really good point that he's made in this video. It is, however, a little bit undermined, I think, by the fact that wherever he is, it seems to be an extremely luxurious and wealthy property. I don't even know if this is in Australia. I mean, this place, you can't really tell. It could be somewhere in Asia, it could be in North America, South America, it could kind of be anywhere in the world except maybe Antarctica. But yeah, while I agree with this guy that property prices and affordability of housing is absolutely out of control, and we need some kind of both like government measures and maybe even private measures. I don't know what that would look like, but you know, we just need stuff to be done to make housing more affordable and more accessible to a wider variety of people, particularly younger people who really have it tough in the housing market right now. But you know, this guy doesn't seem to be one of those people that is having trouble in the housing market, because look behind you, bro. Oh boy. Okay, what else has he got to lecture us about?
Why I'm leaving, because I think this country's fucked beyond repair and it's only going to get worse. So it just didn't make sense for me to stay. I'm lucky enough to be able to just work from my laptop and relocate, so it doesn't really affect me anymore.
Yeah, man, that's kind of the point. You are lucky enough to work on your laptop and, according to you, be making more than $190,000 a year, probably through this freaking, you know, recession-proof multi-billion-dollar industry course that you run that's probably a scam. And so when you start to get a little bit uncomfortable, or when you start to feel like the country isn't being governed specifically for you, then you have the luxury of just saying, okay, I'm gonna leave. And most Australians, right, particularly the Australians who are trying to afford a home, break into the housing market, increase their career status, those people don't have the money to just up and leave. They don't have the ability. They don't even know where they would go. I mean, even people who are here who have like a dual citizenship somewhere else, just because you have a dual citizenship doesn't mean you can just go there and afford to like set up a new life in another country. Like, that is a costly expense that not a lot of people can afford.
If you're staying in Australia, I really do advise you to leave, because it's just not worth it anymore.
So yeah, I think it's safe to say that leaving is just not an option for the average Australian. And I'm sorry, but most people, even if they dislike the way things are, or even if they have criticisms of the way things are being run, they want to improve it from in the country, right? You want to be here, you want to be involved, and you want to make your country better. But apparently not for this guy who, whenever the going gets tough, he's happy to get going. So let's see what his closing remarks may be for us.
If you're staying in Australia, I really do advise you to leave, because it's just not worth it anymore. But I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Do you think living in Australia is actually worth it? Do you think it's going to shit? Do you think I'm overreacting? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.
So, look, I don't even want to say that this guy is necessarily overreacting, because all of these opinions you have a right to have as someone who's in the discourse, and, you know, just like everyone else, you're allowed to have an opinion. But I think it's very disingenuous and very condescending to say to the average person, hey, things are not very good, you should leave. Because the average person can't leave. That is not a luxury afforded to the average Australian, and particularly the average Australian that has criticisms of whatever the government is up to. And for you to come out and, like, you know, give us this whole preach while you're coming from like a very luxurious hotel or apartment or whatever that is, I just can't buy that, man. I just think that you're a little bit of a fraud. As I said at the start of this video, I get the sense that this guy's content, at least the content that does well for him, is the more controversial content, the more complains about our country kind of content. I mean, if we scroll down to the bottom of this TikTok, there's a video with 3.2 million views, which is, I mean, that's pretty viral. Let's see what he has to say in this viral video.
Supposed to survive on $30 an hour. I just got paid and I didn't even get $1,000 for the week of work that I just did. My name's Huddy, I'm 20 years old and I currently live out of home, so I'm paying my own rent, bills, food, fuel, and after paying all my expenses, I'm pretty much left with maybe $100 to $150 per week. Basically living paycheck to paycheck because the cost of living in Australia is completely cooked. My point is, how the fuck am I supposed to save for a house when you got houses like this going for $1 million? Let's just say I cut back on some of my expenses and I was saving $200 a week. Times $200 by 52 weeks of a year, that makes 10 grand. Meaning I would have to save for 20 fucking years to save for a 20% deposit on a home in Australia. Meaning I'm going to be fucking 40 years old before I end up putting this deposit down on this house.
Okay, I mean, those points are all super valid, and I can understand why a video like that has gone so viral, because I'm sure there are a lot of young Australians who relate to this kind of a situation.
Also assuming the house prices don't go up in the next 20 years, which obviously it fucking is. The thing that's fucking crazy though is I always scroll on my phone, right, and I see these kids making so much money from their phone. I make 50k in a year. These cunts are making 50k in a month. And I keep thinking to myself, why the fuck can that not be me? And look,
you see, the pivot is going to be, and so I decided to do an online course, and now you need to ask, why can't it be you? Yeah, I get the sense that this guy is slowly setting up like some kind of an online course scam, but let's see where this goes.
even though I'm super skeptical about the whole thing, I've decided I'm going to give it a crack because this job is not fucking working. So what I'm going to do is document my journey here on my Instagram. Drop me a follow if you want to see the journey. And let's fucking do it, bro. If you hate your job too, drop me a follow. We're in this together. Let's do it. How the fuck are you supposed to survive on $30 an hour?
Okay, so firstly, $30 an hour is above minimum wage, by the way. So there are people in this country that live on that kind of a wage. And yeah, it is hard for them. And I don't know how they're supposed to afford a house or even, comfortably afford rent in the economy that we're in. But this video just feels like a LARP to me. Like, it feels fake. He just said in his previous video that he's getting taxed like 45 to 50%, which means he's not making, what did he say, like $1,000 a week. I think he's making quite a bit more than that, actually. And I think that he doesn't even work this $30 an hour job. I think it's a total lie because he wants to grift and make people, follow his financial guru advice and shit like that. It just doesn't seem like a guy like this has any real interest in discussing how to approach any of these issues that he's talking about when it comes to housing, when it comes to violence, when it comes to wages. I care about all those things, and I would like to see those things improve. And to the degree that I make videos on those kinds of a topic, I'd like to try and cover what approaches we can tackle in making those things better. But this guy seems to be interested a lot more in a quick view and getting people to watch his stuff, give him some ad revenue, maybe sign up to his course, and fund him to what? To leave the country? Oh, the irony of all ironies, by the way, is that in this main video, when he's complaining about immigration has gotten out of control, he's saying here, I left Australia. So what happened? You became an immigrant to own the immigrants? What are you doing, dumbass? If you leave the country and go somewhere else, you are now just an immigrant. You've become the thing that you apparently hate. Isn't you leaving? Aren't you going to be the immigrant in another country, ruining their economic situation? What are we doing here? But unfortunately, this guy's content is not about discourse. It's not about discussing these issues. It's not even about highlighting the struggles that the average Australian faces. This guy, from what I can tell, seems to be interested in rage baiting the algorithm so he can get clicks, views, and maybe online course signups. And unfortunately, accounts like this on Twitter that I found this guy through, Stand Up Global or Stand Up Australia, whatever it is, imploring people to think while it's still legal, Australian and anti-nanny statism, Christ is king. Oh, fantastic. These accounts, I'm sorry, but from my estimation, they're just set up to profit from the divide that exists in our country. They have no genuine interest in actually trying to bring people together, actually trying to make people think about the issues that this country faces and think about ways that we can resolve those issues instead of just throwing our hands up and leaving the country. He cares about getting to stay in his lovely luxury apartment and also, I guess, not paying those 45% in taxes. Let's dodge some. Maybe we can pay 30%, 35%. We'll see what we can do. I guess it doesn't pay well to actually care about these issues and actually present a genuine take. What sells and what pays is to provoke, to be outrageous, to stoke controversy, and to make people feel like things are a lot worse than maybe they really are. And not only did I think this video would just be a good canvas for me to use to present some of my opinions on these topics, but I also just think it's important that when people are putting out content like this, there's a response and people saying, hey, actually, this is kind of bullshit. And these kinds of videos and sharing them to stoke some kind of Albanese scare campaign and make us all think that we're living under some kind of totalitarian extremist government, that to me is just lame and disingenuous and fear-mongering. And so that's not what I'm going to do. I'm here to try and engage honestly and earnestly and give you my thoughts. Obviously, you can disagree with them, and I can disagree with this guy and all the other takes that might be in the comments or whatever. We're allowed to have different opinions, and we're allowed to look at these different issues and come away thinking different things and thinking that they can be solved with different solutions. And to me, the fact that we live in such a vibrant democracy where most of us do get to go out and vote and be politically heard every couple of years, well, that's what makes it worth staying, in my opinion. That's why I wouldn't want to leave, even if I had the privilege to be able to do so. I want to be here and be discussing these issues with my fellow citizens, where we can have this discourse and where we can all talk about where we think the policy should land in the end when it gets legislated, or where do we think the expectations should be on our leaders, and so on and so on. And I'm sure you'll be glad to know I will never sell you any kind of an online course. That is not something I'm interested in. That's all I have to say about this guy's interesting rant. I really don't intend to be sending any kind of like hate or harassment towards him. I just thought that, you know, he put out this sentiment. It went a little bit viral online, and I thought it was worth responding to and using it as kind of a jumping off board to present the way that I see some of these issues and these policies and have a discussion, because that's what we're here to do, eh? So if you enjoyed that, listening to me yap and talk about a couple of these issues, get a bunch of different ideas flowing around, well then why don't you go ahead and like and subscribe, because you won't want to miss the next one where I'll be back yapping some more and talking about all the things that I want to talk about. So I hope to see you next time, and until then, stay weird. I'll see you then. Bye.